Good morning, folks. This is Carl, your ticker guy, coming at you from Niceville, Florida. I traded in my t-shirt for a business suit today. We're going to talk to you about this plan that Mr. Paulson has put together, and I'm going to illustrate my points very clearly using clips from Mr. Brokaw's interview with him this morning on Meet the Press. As Mr. Paulson is a public official, I believe that this use is covered under fair use, and that the public has a right to not only know what's going on, but to comment on it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it.
This is not something that we wanted to do. This is something that is very necessary. We'd had excesses building up for some time in this country. They played out first in terms of bad lending practices, irresponsible borrowing, irresponsible lending. It then moved a chain reaction into the financial institutions, illiquid assets.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Hank. You know, that may be a fairly succinct description of exactly how that occurred. But you know, Goldman Sachs was one of the architects of this, wasn't it? And you were Goldman Sachs chairman for quite some time. So it would seem to me that this movement through the system was something that you should have anticipated. It's something that a lot of other people anticipated, myself, Ms. Shedlock, Rubini. We've been talking about this for over a year now. We've been sending faxes and petitions and making videos and putting ourselves out there. We've been all over the place, in fact, with it. But you don't want to hear it. Now all of a sudden it gets to a place that there's a crisis. Was that crisis manufactured, or is that crisis the natural evolution of things? It's an open question. Let's keep going.
We have over-complexity. Mortgages are now securitized, sliced and diced, put into tranches, sold all over the world.
Yes, indeed we do, and let's talk about how that happened too. That would be because you at Goldman Sachs, along with these other titans of industry like Mr. Thain, Mr. Pandit, Dick Fuld, you guys all ran around and set up these structures to do this. It used to be that when you went and got a mortgage, you went to your local bank, that bank made the loan, they held it on their books, and they held it to maturity, and that meant that they had a very, very strong interest in making sure that you could actually pay them back. They also insisted that you put 20% of your purchase price down on the table as a earnest money deposit, essentially, to guarantee that the bank would not be the one who ate it if something went wrong. But you know, as soon as securitization came into the world, that didn't become important anymore. And we fueled a huge housing boom. This was not an accident, Hank. This was an intentional piece of engineering, and you were one of the people who did it. You're one of the people that made this monster. So Frankenstein has now woken up because he's been jolted by the electricity, and all of a sudden he's running around stepping on people's churches. Now you're surprised that this happened. I don't understand why. You're one of the guys that built this beast. Let's keep going. It gets even better.
Tom, there are a lot of questions, and I can understand there are a lot of questions. This is an urgent matter, and we need to move very quickly.
Oh, yes, it is an urgent matter. It's an urgent matter now, but again, the record is what it is, Mr. Paulson. A year ago, when this whole thing started with the two hedge funds out of Bear Stearns, you started getting petitions and faxes from myself. You started seeing articles in the press from Mr. Rubini. You started seeing entries from Mish. You started seeing other people talking about the fact. You saw Mr. Schiller talking about this. You've seen a number of people. How about Peter Schiff? You know, there's all kinds of folks that have been out here screaming about this now for over a year. You know, now all of a sudden we have this urgency, but this urgency isn't really all that urgent, is it? It was manufactured. It was manufactured by you and Ben Bernanke intentionally sitting on your hands and taking a piecemeal scattergun kind of approach instead of addressing the real problems. Let's keep going.
This is not a position where I like to see the taxpayer, but it is far better than the alternative.
Yes, an alternative that came into the potential to be because of your actions, Hank. That's a little bit of a problem, don't you think? First you put the taxpayer in peril, and then you ride to the rescue. Oh boy, here comes Big Hank on his big white horse. And the problem is, Big Hank was the one that manufactured the beast in the first place. Not so seemly, sir.
But this is a humbling experience to see so much fragility in our capital markets and to ask, how did we ever get here?
Oh, a humbling experience, huh, Mr. Paulson? Well, I haven't seen you eat any humble pie. In fact, what I've seen is you strut your stuff and you lock yourself in a room with senators and representatives and predict the end of the world if you don't get plenary authority to do whatever you'd like. You know, some people would call this terrorism. You created this mess. Now you demand the power to fix it, or the world's going to explode. Some people would say, that's financial terrorism, Hank. But you're the Treasury Secretary. You wouldn't think it would come from someone like you, would you? Let's keep going.
Well, a lot of people are saying a lot of things, Tom, and a lot of people want to rewrite history.
Yeah, a lot of people would like to rewrite history. That would probably be first and foremost you, Mr. Paulson. Look, I'm normally skeptical of my government, but in this case I'm outraged. You cashed out over $500 million worth of stock and stock options when you came to work for the Treasury. You did so without paying 1 penny of tax. That's allowable under the law because we want people to be able to go into government work without being penalized by the tax code and having to divest themselves of their assets at the time that they do so. I understand that. What I don't understand and refuse to accept is the idea that you can create this kind of a Frankenstein monster of a financial system, an act that you clearly perpetrated, that you were an open and willing participant in when you ran Goldman Sachs. You can then sit around with your finger up your butt for the better part of a year, long beyond the time at which various commentators start raising hell, including myself, but not limited to myself. No, I don't have a PhD behind my name like Ben Bernanke does. I just ran a company for more than 20 years. You know, it isn't something that is very hard to figure out. It's just basic mathematics. When people can't pay their debts back, they default. When you make loans to people based upon the rising price of assets in a speculative bubble, it's going to end badly. I happen to be the CEO of an internet company during the technology bubble, so I know all about bubbles and about how they get blown and about how asset values get blown totally out of proportion, and the fact that they inevitably always bust. You, Mr. Paulson, went through the 1990s and the 2000 tech crash, and you ran Goldman Sachs during a major part of the housing bubble and during the creation of this credit mess. You are largely responsible for the creation of this monster, and now you wish the taxpayers to grant you plenary authority in order to bail them out. I don't believe you, Mr. Paulson. Furthermore, the proposal that you sent up to the Hill isn't going to cost $700 billion. It's going to cost an infinite amount of money. The $700 billion is the amount that you can hold on your balance sheet at any one time. You can launder money through that $700 billion facility as many times as you like, and one must presume that you will. So you could take the entirety of Fannie and Freddie's portfolio, for an example, $5.3 trillion, launder it through that facility. 20% of that loss could end up being the taxpayer's cost, over $1 trillion. You could then do it again. You could go through Citibank's portfolio, Goldman Sachs' portfolio, everybody else's portfolio. And you've conveniently written into the law a provision that nobody who gets damaged by your choice of which institutions die and which institutions live in this process, none of those people can sue. We've already had trillions of dollars of wealth wiped out as a direct result of your actions. Fannie and Freddie's preferred and common stock, AIG's preferred and common stock, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns. How much more do we need to tolerate, Mr. Paulson? You're asking to be made dictator of the United States financial system, and I think it's time for the people of this country, as well as the Congress, to stand up and say, no mas. This is the last chance we get, folks. You need to get on the phone now, early, and often.